Okay. All right. So good morning again. And once again, if you're following along with us, please, please, please try to download, if at all possible, try to download those two documents that were posted in the comments on the Teams page, because one of them is the DBQ itself, the prompt and the documents that we'll be looking at. And then the second one is kind of the planning page where I'll be writing in all of the important information. So both of those will, I think, make this session probably a whole lot more useful for you today. So what we are focusing on today, and what the focus of our work this week is going to be, is all about DBQ writing. Okay, remember that your exam is next week. Okay, it is on May the 21st, so it's a week from Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Last week, you did a practice DBQ. This week, your only assignment for the entire week, I'm only giving you one this week, is going to be one final DBQ practice. Okay, and so I'll be posting the prompt right after this is over, actually. So probably within the next hour, the prompt will be posted and you can work on that. So there's only one assignment this week. It's a practice DBQ. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do what many of you did with your practice one last week, which is time yourselves and then stop just before 50 minutes. Several of them, I already graded a bunch of them over the weekend. Several of you literally stopped mid-sentence, I guess, when your timer ran out. And that's good, that's fine, okay? Because I want you to see what you would have completed were it an actual test, okay? So keep that up, definitely, okay? And keep working on that. So today we're gonna go through a general walkthrough of what you should be doing, how you should be organizing things and writing the DBQ. And then later this week, we'll talk about some specific points. And then on Friday, I'll talk with you about a strategy for writing the DBQ that you may want to consider that uses only 2 of the documents, okay? That could still get you up to an 8 out of 10. So we'll look at that strategy at the end of the week, okay? One of the first things I'm going to tell you as we get started this morning, and I'll be talking more about this as the week goes on, is that the complexity point is not something that you should worry too much about. You don't have enough time. You only have between 45 and 50 minutes, and the complexity point, almost nobody gets it to begin with. And it's something that could just suck time away from you if you try to do it. You can still get a 9 out of 10 without it, and a 9 out of 10 would still be a score of 5. So as we go through everything this week, just keep in mind that the complexity point is not something that you should even attempt to bother with. And that's not because I don't think you're smart enough to do it. It's more just because I don't think there's enough time for you to do it, and I'd rather you focus the 45 to 50 minutes that you have on earning some of the other points. Okay, so I wouldn't worry too much about the complexity point. Where I would focus my energy, okay, is if we go ahead and we look at our rubric here. Where I would focus my energy, okay, is going to be on this first page of the rubric, okay? Obviously, the thesis is super important, okay? Contextualization, definitely important, but then look at the evidence part, okay, part C. This is where you can get up to 5 of the 10 points. So half of the points on your exam can come from the evidence, okay? And so this is really gonna be where you absolutely need to focus on making sure you do your job and do it well. If you can get the 5 evidence points, plus the thesis and the contextualization, that's a 7 out of 10. That's at least a 3, more than likely a 4. Okay, I would say a 7 out of 10 is either a very high 3 or a low 4, depending on how they decide to score it. So you really, if you're looking at this rubric, and you should have seen it a million times by now, you really want to be focusing on the first page of that rubric as we begin to go through this. All right, so let's look at a sample prompt and let's talk about how we would approach this. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the 2018 DBQ prompt. So this was from the AP World History exam in 2018. Okay, so we just had a question in the chat To get the 5 points for the evidence, do you have to use all 5 of the documents? The answer is, technically speaking, no. Okay, and I'm going to go more into that later this week when I start to talk to you about some of the strategies that you can use. So we're going to hold off on answering that question for right now. Okay, so let's take a look at the 2018 DBQ. Okay, now this obviously originally was a 7-document DBQ. I've gone ahead and I've cut down 2 of the documents and I've renumbered the ones that we have to make it a 5-document DBQ. Okay, so like I said, if you're able to pull this up, I posted it on the Teams page. If possible, if you can pull it up, it'll be much easier for you to follow along with us now. Okay, so we have our 2018 DBQ topic, and our prompt is right here, and it's evaluate the extent, which is what the language is going to be. Evaluate the extent to which railroads affected the process of empire building in Afro-Eurasia between 1860 and 1918. So that's our prompt, okay? I'm going to tell you right now, it sounds a lot harder than it is. As we begin to go through this, you'll see that it's actually a lot easier than what you might think. So the first thing that we need to do, and we need to do this part very quickly, generally speaking on the day of the exam, we need to do it within 1 minute, is we need to figure out what this prompt is asking us. Okay, there are 3 things we have to pull out of this prompt. And so to do that, I'm going to go over here to my the second document that I posted that you'll want to use as you follow along, okay, which is this DBQ planning worksheet. Now this might be something that you want to have open, okay, and you might want to fill this in the day of the exam. It might be something you want to print out ahead of time and make notes on as you go, but it'll certainly help you. Okay, so like I said, within 1 minute, I need to figure out 3 things with my prompt. I need to figure out which of the 3 historical thinking skills this particular essay prompt is asking me about, and so I need to know what kind of an essay I'm writing. Okay, I need to figure out what they're comparing, what kind of change they're looking for, etc. And then I need to identify the time period. So I need to do these 3 things, and I need to do them very quickly, okay? So this first one here is, which of the 3 historical thinking skills are we using? And so if we look back at our prompt, we're evaluating the extent to which railroads affected, there's our key word, the verb, affected the process of empire building in Afro-Eurasia between 1860 and 1918. Now, if we're talking about one thing affecting another, okay, that's going to be which of these 3 skills? You can just unmute your mic and just call it out. Are we comparing? Are we doing continuity and change over time? Or is it causation? Which of the 3 skills is that? Somebody tell me. When we're talking about effect.
Causation.
Causation, yes, exactly. Because remember, causation implies effect. Okay, so because the prompt is asking us about how this affected that, okay, we're doing a causation essay here. So my essay is going to be about causation, which remember includes effect as well. Okay, cause implies effect. Okay, so we're not just going to talk about causes in our essay, we're going to talk about effects as well. And so now we need to think, because we know we're talking about cause and effect, I want to know what is the prompt asking me? What is affecting what? So what are they saying is affecting what? We have to figure out how what affects what. Anybody know? We need to determine what?
How the process of the empire building is like affecting Afro-Eurasia?
Not quite. Okay. What is affecting empire building? What is the question asking us specifically about? What is it?
Railroads.
Railroad. There we go. Okay, so we need to figure out, we are looking at how railroads affect empire building. Okay, now empire building is just a fancy way of saying what? When we talk about empire building, we're talking about what?
Imperialism.
Imperialism or colonization, okay? So we're talking about colonization specifically here, okay? So empire building, understand, is just a way of saying imperialism, okay? Way to go, Jorge, with the game show jokes, with the Family Feud reference. Okay, so we're looking at how Railroads affect empire building. And what's our time period? This one is super easy. Our time period is what? Look at the prompt.
1860 and 1918.
1860 to 1918. It's important to note that. And the reason it's important to note that is because if you write an essay about something that takes place outside of that time period, you're not going to get credit. It's not going to be scored. So don't write an essay about World War II, okay? You won't get any points for that if this is the prompt. Make sure that you're writing about something within the time period. Now, can you mention things outside of the time period to get outside evidence points? Yes, absolutely, okay? But understand that the bulk of your essay needs to be written about this time period, okay? All right, so now that we've got that done, we need to go on to the next part of our essay. Oops, okay. We need to go on to the next part of our essay, which is where we have to very quickly begin to look at the documents. Now, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to read the documents for you or with you, because that would just take too much time and would just be boring. Okay, but I would suggest that going through these 5 documents, this is a process that you need to be finished with in no more than 10 minutes. Okay, so the day of the exam, you need to be reading through these documents, making these notes like this very, very quickly. Okay, this needs to be like no more than a 10-minute process. Okay, and so that's super important. So our first document here is document number 1. Okay, it's a text source. Now, when you read through the document, what you're going to find, okay, when you read through this document right here, and again, I'm not going to read through the whole thing with you, but what you're going to find, okay, is that the Jing dynasty, okay, they're going to say that they should build the railroads, so that the Jing dynasty should build the railroads, okay, and the reason that they should build the railroads is that it would, well, they should build the railroads, and they should only allow Westerners, meaning Europeans, okay, so they should only allow Westerners, to build the railroads if they agree, oops, I can't type, if they agree to uphold Chinese culture or values, okay, if they agree to uphold Chinese culture. So it's saying that the Jing should build the railroads, and they should only allow the Westerners to build the railroads if they agree to uphold Chinese culture. Now, this is making me think of outside evidence, okay? And the reason I say that you should start to think of your outside evidence now, the reason I say that is because sometimes as you're reading documents, you are going to think of outside evidence that might go along with it. So don't necessarily leave the outside evidence until the end. As you go through the documents, if you think of something that is related to outside evidence, jot it down, either in a chart like this or in the margin or something. You can always come back to it later. And so in this case, when I think of what this document says, my mind is immediately drawn to thinking about something called the self-strengthening movement, which we talked about last week. Remember that the self-strengthening movement was this idea that the Chinese had, that they wanted to decrease the influence and the power of the West. They wanted to make China itself stronger, to prevent being taken over and to prevent their values from being overrun by the West, okay? And so that's what we have right there. When we're thinking about main ideas for documents, okay, what you want to be thinking about, what you want to be jotting down in terms of main idea, remember, you don't just want to be summarizing a document. What you want to be putting in here, okay, is the idea or the answer to the question, which is, how does this document help me answer the question about railroad building, okay? So what in this document is going to help me answer the prompt? That's what you should be thinking about for your outside evidence, okay? For your sourcing, you only need to do it twice. You may want to do it a third time just to be sure that you get that point, okay? But for your sourcing, again, you only need to do it twice, okay? We have the H, remember, is our historical situation. The A or the I, depending on which one you want to use, is either intended audience or just audience, okay? And then you have the purpose and the point of view. Those are the two P's, okay? This we only, like I said, have to do twice, okay? Possibly three times. So for this one, I'm not going to include anything about sourcing, and I'm just going to jump down right now down to document number 2. Now, document number 2, if I scroll down, that's this one right here. Notice right away, document number 2 is not dealing with the Chinese, okay? Document number 2 is dealing with the Ottomans, so we're jumping into the Muslim Empire, okay? So this is a different part of the world at this point. All right, we just got a question in the chat. Hang on. Let me see. Where'd my chat go? What happened? Here we go. Okay. Could we use this on test day, or would the program say that you are cheating? Yes, you can use this document on test day. Okay, you are welcome to use this graphic organizer. I'm going to upload it again so that you have it. If you want to print it and then write your notes by hand in there, you can do that, or you can type right in it, okay? And then Elliot said, I don't think I was here for the HAP. What is that? So that's for your sourcing. It can either be HAP or it can be HIP, but the H is historical context or the historical situation. The A is the audience. If you do HIP, it's intended audience, and then the 2 P's are purpose and point of view. So it just depends on if you want to use HAP or HIP, okay? If you want to go with I for intended audience or A for audience, you can use either one, okay? And then Jan said we only have to source 2 to 3 documents with HAP. Yeah, so if you look at your sourcing points, let me pull the rubric back up here. And if you look at your sourcing, where is the sourcing point? Here we go. Okay, so for your sourcing, it comes over here, okay? And so for the 2 sourcing points, notice you only have to do it for 2, okay? You get 1 point for doing it for 1 document, and then a 2nd point for doing it for the 2nd document. So yes, you only have to source 2 of the documents, okay? All right, so let's jump back over to our chart. Okay, and so again, I'm not going to read document through to you. I'm just going to read off my notes here. Okay, what I put down is the main idea for document 2. And so what I put down for document 2 is that our main idea here is that it argues for control of the railroads. Okay, it argues for control of the railroads or the construction. Actually, let's say construction, because this is pro railroads, this document. So it argues for construction of the railroads to Mecca and Medina, which are very important cultural sites for Muslims, okay? It argues for the construction of the railroads to Mecca and Medina to make pilgrimages easier and to decrease the power of the West. Because the argument that they're making in this document, when you read it, is you'll see that they are saying, if we build these railroads and we control them, we won't have to have our people pay to take European ships to get to Mecca or to get to Medina to go on their pilgrimages. We'll be able to do this ourselves, and we'll be able to control this, and the West will not have as much power over us. That's what document 2 is essentially arguing for, okay? Now, I'm going to jump over here. I don't have any outside evidence that goes with this one, which is okay. And I'm going to jump over here to my sourcing. And I'm going to think about how I can source this particular document, okay? And there's really 2 things that you could do here. We could source this for the POV. We could also source this for the purpose. It's going to be very easy. Either one of them is going to be very easy to do. Because what this author is doing is he's writing to the Sultan, and he's essentially flattering him. He's telling the Sultan what a wonderful guy he is, how great he is, how wonderful it all is. So he's flattering the Sultan to get him to build the railroads. Okay, so He's laying on all of these wonderful words describing him and how great this would be for them. But his real purpose is he wants him to build the railroads. So the point of view is that he's pro railroad, and he's trying to flatter the Sultan because his purpose is he wants him to build the railroads. Okay? All right, so now we're done with document number 2. Now we can jump right ahead to document 3, which is our visual source, if I remember correctly. Yep, and so this one is the map. Okay, and so we have to go ahead and we have to look, and we have to see what kind of a map we are looking at here. First of all, we need to note that this is Africa. Okay, in fact, it is the east coast of Africa. Okay, and we have, according to this map, we have a line of railroads that are going to stretch from the city of Cairo in the north all the way down to Cape Town in the southeast eventually. Okay, you can see that the railroad is not fully built yet. Okay, the solid line indicates railroads that are already built, and then the dashed lines are either railroads that are currently under construction or will soon be under construction. Okay, and so the goal here clearly is to connect Cairo right down to Cape Town. Okay, and so our main idea here, then this is super easy. Okay, our main idea here is that we have a map of railroads and construction connecting Cairo to Cape Town. And so it is connecting it is connecting British colonies. Okay, so the idea here is that we are connecting the northern British colonies in Africa with the southern British colonies in Africa. Now, as I continue to look at this map, okay, I'm going to see something right here that's going to jump out at me, and I'm going to see it's going to be the name Cecil Rhodes. Okay, Cecil Rhodes should be one of those trigger terms in my mind, and that should begin to start to make me think about some outside evidence. Okay, British colonization in Africa, Cecil Rhodes. And so now what I'm starting to think about here for my outside evidence is I'm starting to think about social Darwinism. Okay, I'm starting to think about apartheid, which is legalized racism. And I'm starting to think about, let me see another way to put this, social Darwinism. I'm just going to say racism. Okay, we're starting to think about, well, no, let's use the better term. Let's say white man's burden. Okay, so I'm starting to think about these ideas as it relates to British colonization of Africa. Okay, so now I've got my second bit of outside evidence. Okay, now we're going to jump ahead and we're going to go right to document number 4. Okay, and document number 4 again is another written source. Okay, and so when you read document number 4, okay, you're going to see that it's going to talk about the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So we're jumping up to Russia now. Okay, and so the purpose of document number 4 is to explain that the Trans-Siberian Railroad allows Russia, okay, to dominate East Asia, because it's going to be all about how if they build this railroad, Russia will have complete control over East Asia, and it will dominate East Asia, okay, as well as protect their interests. So it's a way for them to protect their colonial interests in East Asia, okay, and prevent another group from taking over. Now, this is one that I think I can very easily also go ahead and source for purpose, okay, because what he's doing in this one, it's an editorial that he writes, is the author here is trying to influence public opinion, okay, by criticizing, there we go, by criticizing the British government. So he's, getting on the British government, trying to, write about this very nationalistic, very pro-Russia, okay, sort of an article by criticizing the British government. So it's to invoke nationalist feelings. Okay, so you could bring in a little bit of nationalism here. And, so this might be something where if you're starting to, if you had time and you were starting to think about complexity, nationalism could be an idea that you could weave through your argument for all of this. So that might be something that you want to bring in, okay, if you're starting to think about complexity. Very important reminder about purpose. This is a mistake that a lot of students make when they're sourcing documents for purpose, and they end up not getting the point for this, okay? Purpose does not simply mean that you describe the content of the document. All that is a summary. Summarizing the document is not the purpose, okay? What you need to do to get a sourcing point for purpose is you need to make sure that you're able to tell me, what is the document intended to do? Okay, what is this document intended to do? Don't just summarize it. What is it intending to do? Why was it written? Okay, just simply summarizing it's not going to get you the point that you need. Okay, and then we jump finally to document number 5, which is the last one. Okay, and this one is going to deal with railroads in India. So notice that each of the documents that we've looked at have dealt with a different part of the world. We had one document about China. We had the Africa document. Okay, we had the one about the Ottoman Empire, the Muslims in Asia. Okay, now we have India, and then in the map we had Africa. So we're looking at 5 different areas of Afro-Eurasia. Okay, so this one is going to deal with India. Okay, and so in this document, once you read it, you'll see that the main idea here is that the construction of the railroads in India helps to unify the people. If I could spell unify, right? There we go. Helps to unify the people. Okay, so it helps to unify the people who all belong to different ethnic groups, ethnic and religious groups. So basically what this document says is that India has all these different ethnic groups and all these different religious groups, and they were all operating at the time pretty much independently. And the author argues that building the railroads is something that's going to unite all of these people, okay? And it's going to help make them loyal to the British Empire, okay? Because the British Empire was who was in control at the time. So his argument here is that building the railroads is a way to unify India nationally, to sort of bring them together and to help make them more loyal to the British Empire, okay? And so I'm going to source this one because it's super easy to source. Remember, I said you only have to do 2, but if possible, you want to get in a 3rd one just in case you source one of the documents wrong. And so our point of view here is that railroads can be used to maintain control, okay? Or that the British can be used to maintain control over the Indian people, okay? Or it's a way to control the nationalist movements in India, okay? So it's a way to control the nationalist movements within India, okay? Because at this time, India's got a whole bunch of these independence movements beginning to get started. Gandhi is one of them, okay? And the British are going to use the railroads as a way to sort of control that nationalist movement, okay? So now we're done here. I've got the main ideas for all 5 of my documents. I've got 2 pieces of outside evidence, and I've sourced 3 of the documents, even though I only need to source 2 of them, okay? Now, like I said, this took us a little bit longer because I was explaining everything and walking through it. This particular piece is something that you need to have take you no more than 10 minutes the day of the exam, okay? So you are gonna have to work quickly here. Those of you that are not fast typers, that's why I recommend, if at all possible, you print this page out so that you can just scribble in some notes, okay? That'll help make it go faster. Or maybe you don't print this paper. Maybe you have it just on like a piece of notebook paper or something, and you just jot this stuff down as you go, and you do it quickly. All right, so now normally under a standard 7-document DBQ, you will recall that I have always told you you need to have 3 different groups, okay? You need to have, 3 body sort of paragraphs, okay? With only 5 documents and only between 45 and 50 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that we're gonna need to consolidate this, okay? And we're gonna have to do this into 2 groups, okay? There simply isn't time, and I don't think there's enough documents for you to make this into 3 groups. So when you're doing this, you're going to group your documents into 2 different groups and 2 different body paragraphs. And so the easiest way to group these is I'm going to group documents 1 and 2 together, okay? And then I'm going to group documents 3, 4, and 5 together. Now, the reason I'm going to do that is because it makes sense to do that when I think of what these documents say, okay? And so documents 1 and 2 are both about decreasing these countries' dependence on the West. Okay, document 1 talks about China wanting to have, for the West to have less power. And then document 2 talks about how if they build these railroads, they won't need to rely on these Western ships to bring their pilgrims to Mecca. So documents 1 and 2 are both going to be about decreasing dependence on the West, okay? Then if I look at documents 3, 4, and 5, okay, documents 3, 4, and 5 are all going to be about consolidation of power. In document 3 in the map, it shows us how much more efficient the British Empire would be in Africa if they had these railroads. Document 4 talks about how much more control in East Asia the Russians would have if they built the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And then document 5 talks about how they could make all these diverse ethnic groups loyal to the British Empire if they built these railroads. Okay, so now I have my 2 groups, okay? Now I'm gonna look at my topic sentences, okay? Now, what is very important here about your topic sentence, this is gonna be the first sentence of each of these body paragraphs, okay? You're going to, in your topic sentence, you are going to use the documents. So after you write a topic sentence, you are going to use the documents, excuse me, use the documents to prove what it is you say in your topic sentence, and then you can go into your analysis. So if I'm thinking about how I'm going to write my topic sentence here, okay, and I've already written it out, I'm going to read it off to you. What I came up with for my topic sentence here is that railroads greatly affected by decreasing. Railroads greatly affected development, there it is, development in Afro-Eurasia by decreasing their dependence on the West, specifically in China and the Ottoman Empire. So that's my topic sentence for this paragraph. Notice that it's not super fancy. Okay, but notice that since the prompt asked us to what extent, I gave the extent. I said it greatly affected it by decreasing their dependence on the West, specifically in China and the Ottoman Empire. Okay, and then I'm going to jump over here to my other paragraph. And I'm going to go, yes, I'm glad you all saw that Ryan Ball was having a medical procedure today. I'm going to go to my other paragraph, okay? And my topic sentence for this paragraph is going to be that railroads greatly affected, again, I can't type, railroads greatly affected empire building, which remember is a fancy way of saying colonization. So, and the reason that we're using empire building and not colonization is because the prompt, if I were to go back up to the top here, the prompt talks about empire building and not colonization. Okay, so that's why I'm not saying colonization. So railroads greatly affected empire building by allowing European powers, or greatly affected empire building, let me see how to phrase this the best way. Railroads greatly affected empire building by allowing European powers to consolidate their power over their colonies, except I don't want to use powers twice. We'll say European empires. That sounds better, okay? Railroads greatly affected empire building by allowing the European empires to consolidate their power over their colonies. Done, okay? So now I have my 2 topic sentences, okay? And so for my 2 body paragraphs, now I've got my topic sentences written, which means now what I would do after each of these is I would use these documents up here, okay, to try to prove this point, as well as complete what my analysis is going to be, okay? And so now we get to the thesis, possibly the most important part of all of this, because the thesis is going to come at the very beginning, okay? And so remember our format for the thesis with the X, A, and B, and the Y, okay? And so here's what I came up with for my thesis. I'm going to use although, okay? So I'm going to say that although railroads planted the seeds of nationalism. Now, why am I bringing up nationalism here? Because I'm starting to set up, if I were to do so, I'm starting to set up my complexity point, okay? And so, whoops. And so that's why I'm bringing up nationalism here. So although railroads planted the seeds of nationalism, which would later break apart empires, okay? Now, that's my X. There's my counter argument right there. I'm going to highlight that in, I'm going to make that red, okay? And so there's my counter argument. So that's my X. Although railroads planted the seeds of nationalism, which would later break apart empires, okay? Now I'm going to go into my specific historical evidence, okay, which will later break apart empires. From the perspective, I'll change the font color in a minute. From the perspective, I can't type, okay, I have, from the perspective of the imperial powers, railroads, and let's capitalize that, railroads gave the colonial powers, an opportunity to, here it is, to decrease their dependence on the West. Okay, so there's the first part of my argument. To decrease their dependence on the West and to consolidate their power. Okay, so this middle part here is not really anything. Okay, but then to decrease their dependence on the West, there's my X, or there's my A rather, excuse me. So that's my first argument. To decrease their dependence on the West, that's my A. And then we get to, and consolidate their power. Okay, that's my B, which I'll make green. Okay, so now I have my A and I have my B. The last thing I have to do is I have to include my own argument at the end of this, okay? And so I'm going to wrap this thesis up by saying, therefore, in the period 1860 to 1918, make sure you include the time period so that the reader knows that you're writing about the correct time period. So therefore, in the period 1860 to 1918, railroads were used. Okay, railroads were among, actually is how I want to put that, railroads were among the greatest foundations, is what I'm going to say, of empire building. Okay, that's a little bit awkwardly phrased. I'd like to think of a better word for foundations. But basically, my argument is going to be that railroads were extremely important in empire building. Okay, and so that would be the third part of my thesis. That would be the why. Okay, so I have my counter argument up here in red. Blue and green are my A and B, and then my argument is the brown part here, which is that railroads are among the greatest foundations of empire building, greatest applications of empire building. Okay, so now I've got my thesis. Okay, now we need to quickly get down to our contextualization. Okay, here's the thing that you have to do with contextualization. Okay, not only do you have to name it, okay, but you also have to explain it. So you want to make sure that you're naming and explaining as well as connecting. Okay, you have to do all three things in order to earn the contextualization point. You have to name it, you've got to explain to me what it is, and then finally you have to connect it to the argument. So if I'm thinking back about vocabulary and I'm thinking about concepts or ideas or terms here, I'm thinking that I'm going to contextualize this certainly, first of all, by talking about the Industrial Revolution. Okay, I'm certainly going to explain industrialization here. Okay, and so I would name it, I would explain what it was, and then I would connect it to my argument, talking about automation. Okay, moving goods faster and more efficiently. Then I'm going to go on from that. Okay, and I'm going to talk about the steam engine, okay, or the invention of the steam engine or the steamship, right? And I'm going to talk about how that's going to lead to the development of the steam, of the railroad, okay? And so how the steam engine kind of makes all that possible, okay? And then lastly, my third and final piece of contextualization is I would talk a little bit about imperialism. Remember I said a while ago that's going to come up again, okay? And so I would talk about imperialism here, and how these countries, as they're industrializing, they need more raw materials, and they're looking to get those raw materials for manufacturing from other parts of the world, looking to do it cheaply and to exploit the people that live there, okay? And so that's how I would finish up my contextualization. So I would name these three things, I would explain them, and then I would connect them. Okay, and then last but not least is going to be my two pieces of evidence beyond the documents, which, if you recall, I've already done. Okay, and so, I would then have to go back, okay, and I would look at my two pieces of the evidence beyond the documents. So once I establish here, okay, once I establish in my contextualization a line of reasoning, which is that something like in order for the people, or rather in order to rule over people, you need to be able to get to them, right? So I would talk about how the Industrial Revolution made colonization much easier because it made getting back and forth a lot faster. So I'm tying all those three things together. And then I could finish by saying that imperialism, okay, or this rise of imperialism was certainly facilitated by the development of the railroads. Now, my outside evidence beyond the documents. Notice that we already came up with that, okay? And so we saved the student, or we saved the writers, you guys, we saved ourselves some time. I have two pieces of outside evidence here. I've got the self-strengthening movement in China, and I've got social Darwinism and the white man's burden and apartheid in Africa, okay? And so we're gonna start here with the self-strengthening movement. I'm going to name it explicitly, right? It's important here that you name it, you explain it, and then you connect it. And then my second piece of evidence would be social Darwinism slash apartheid slash white man's burden, okay? You could use either or all of them, whichever one you wanted to use there, okay? Now, it's not enough just to simply name them, okay? In order to get these points, I have to explain them, right? So for the self-strengthening movement, I would need to explain that it helped China decrease its dependence or reduce its dependence on the West, and that the railroads were an important part of that, because if China built the railroads, okay, they would be able to control them on their own without any influence from the West, okay? And then apartheid or social Darwinism or the white man's burden would be this sort of legalized racial system that the British imposed in their colonies within Africa, okay? And so I could talk about how the British felt that they were superior to these people, and the way that they would connect it is that they felt like this land was theirs for the taking, and that they should be able to set up their colonies pretty much unfettered, okay? That they should be able to do what they wanted to do because they were above these people, because they were civilized, the Africans weren't, and that therefore this land was theirs for the taking, that it was their duty even as the superior race to go into Africa and to do these things, okay? And so now I'm all set up. Now I know what my evidence beyond the documents is. I know how I'm contextualizing. I've got a thesis, and I've got my two body paragraphs all set up, okay? And so now what I have to do is I have to write this. And so if you get to this point, if you have all this stuff done and you still have a good 25 minutes or so, you're in good pretty good shape, because I think once you have all this laid out, okay, the essay itself is going to be written pretty quickly. You know, so you should be able to do this pretty quickly. Big thing to remember, okay, big thing to remember is as you start going into your analysis, so as you start going into your body paragraphs after that topic sentence, the big thing to remember is you want to keep in mind the question, which is, how do the documents prove my argument? Okay, don't simply summarize documents, but you need to explain, how do the documents summarize your argument? That's going to be the big thing to remember there as you write that. All right, so let's come back, and I'm going to stop here, okay? And I'm going to ask you if you have questions at this point about writing, questions at this point about writing the DBQ, or questions about the outline that I just walked you through, or anything else related to writing at this point. I think this is a good strategy for you to use as you're writing this. Obviously, I'm not going to be there the day of the exam to force you to do this, but it's something, you know, that I think you should keep in mind. So what questions do you have at this point? Any questions at all? No? Okay, so your assignment for this week is going to be posted within the next hour. Okay, and it's one assignment this week. There's not two, it's just one final DBQ practice. I'm also going to post this graphic organizer that goes along with it. You don't have to complete the graphic organizer. That is optional. It's there to help you. You can if you want to. You can download it. You can print it off and use it the day of the exam. You can have it open on your computer the day of the exam and go back and forth. That's up to you. Okay, but I am going to post the document as well. So you will get a prompt a little bit later this afternoon. You'll get your 5 documents, and like I said, this will be your final assignment for this week. And then next week, the week of your exam, I'm not giving you any required assignments. The only thing I'm going to ask you to do, other than review, is going to be to make sure that you're getting all your notes and stuff organized and ready to go, so that you can find things more efficiently. Okay, so on Wednesday, we'll get together again. And on Wednesday, I'm going to talk specifically about using documents to find evidence and to find analysis. So that's going to be Wednesday's call. And then Friday's Zoom call is going to be about a strategy that you may want to use where you can earn 8 out of 10 points just using 2 of the 5 documents. Okay, so we'll look that over on Friday. So Wednesday, we're going to focus specifically on the evidence. And then Friday, we're going to look at a strategy that you may want to use where you could earn 8 out of 10 points just for using 2 of the documents. Okay? All right. So if there's no other questions, then I will see you guys on Wednesday. Have a good rest of the day. Like I said, I will post the assignment for this week within the next hour or so. Otherwise, just like Mika said, make sure if you like this video, you like, share, subscribe. Click that bell icon, because the road to 1 million does in fact start now. All right, have a great Monday, everybody, and I will see you all on Wednesday. Take care. Goodbye, everybody.
Guten Tag.
Bye.